salty water sound. Chesapeake Bay Blues is what this song's about.
What's going on, everybody? We are back. Season 4, episode 3. I believe I screwed something up. I think it might say episode 4 today, but it is episode 3. And I'm excited to be here tonight. I don't want to go any further without plugging the sponsor for tonight, Crazyhorse Fishing Rods. If you haven't checked out what David and Kelly are doing at Crazyhorse Fishing Rods, give them a look. They do great work, and right now they're building an awesome fishing rod for me to catch all sorts of species on the Chesapeake Bay. Also tonight, once again, I'm showcasing Eric Packard's amazing artwork. Tonight we have I get everything on the cameras backwards. We have a seagull. This is actually a painting or print that Eric Packard has done, and again the driftwood snakehead, which our guest tonight is going to talk about. He filled me in on the complete story. Thanks, Eric, for leaving me out in the cold and not telling me all of the information. Super excited to have added a few guests. One of them is something I cannot quite talk about, but it's like 99% locked in, and I'll probably be able to share this with you guys next week. But I think everyone's going to really like this kind of secret guest. And I got my man Coop that's going to join us from Heroes on the Water. He'll be coming, I think, in about 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. Next week, I'm super excited to have my man Brandon, the Baltimore Angler, as you guys may know him, or TBA. Can't wait to talk all sorts of fishing. Brandon doesn't really know this yet, but I want to talk to him a lot about shark fishing because it's something we haven't really done a lot of on this show quite yet. But without further ado, I want to bring in my guest for tonight. It is David Sikorski. What's up, David? How are you?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. David's a native Marylander and a lifetime and avid fisherman and sportsman. He began volunteering for the Coastal Conservation Association of Maryland in 2005 until, working his way up the ladder and becoming the executive director in 2017. David was appointed to the Maryland Fisheries Advisory Commission in 2009 and currently serves as the vice chair. He also represents CCA Maryland on the Oyster Advisory Commission. He recently was selected as the legislative proxy for the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission and is a member of the Marine Resources Education Program and National Steering Commission and Mid-Atlantic Implementation Team. David, you do a lot of things.
Sleep is overrated.
Sleep is really.
No, I'm kidding. I'm really good at it.
Me, I love it.
The joke is that I always joke with my wife because she doesn't sleep, and I joke. I say I have that thing inside of me like an iPhone has. As soon as you tip it over, it goes to sleep. I'm the same way. If you put me horizontal, I'm out. In fact, I have a great group of fishing buddies who will tell you that they like to spray me with a hose when I fall asleep on tuna trips when the troll bite gets slow. And that's my MO with my offshore fishing buddies is I take too many naps.
Well, generally this show is just a giant facade for getting fishing information from you guys so I can steal it.
Mm-hmm.
But forget all that. Teach me that trick.
The nap.
That, where you can just lay down and fall asleep immediately. Man, that would be amazing. The only thing I can get up for is fishing.
See, I'm a hunter too, and I used to be a waterfowl guide, so getting up early is no problem. Never has been, never, hopefully never will be. And that's why you just have to be really good at napping. You sleep when you can.
Yeah.
There was like a famous Seinfeld episode. I think they were talking, Kramer was trying to like nap sporadically throughout the day, and that was enough for him to, fulfill his sleep needs. And I haven't tested that, but makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I always take a nap. I'll get up really early for fishing, and I always take a nap afterwards, particularly if I'm out on my boat. I don't know what it is, but like kayak fishing kind of wears me out, but that center console, man, especially if it's a little rough out there,
Oh, yeah.
I get home and I pass right out.
It's all the fresh air too.
Yeah. Yeah. Fresh air will kill you, right?
For you.
So I'm going to bring back something that I've done in the past, where the question of the night, which you select, David, you pick the question of the night. So
it
comes with a lot of responsibility, right?
Okay.
So a lot of times people say, oh, it was that question that was, I can't remember the guy's name. So the pressure's on. If you can't screw this up. It's a big deal.
I got it.
So you're gonna choose the question of the night, and it comes with a prize. So the question of the night gets a prize, and you have something pulled.
We have some options. We have some Sims CCA hats. That's a camo one. We've got an AFCO CCA hat. We have these in black as well. That's a Sims kind of blue water camo CCA hat. That's another different camo, and then just a solid gray. So, question of the day: somebody gets to select the hat they want. And
you came strong, dude.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we got all sorts of goodies here, and gotta be proud of what CCA does. And I want to get somebody a hat. So,
well, we haven't really got started talking about it, and I'm already proud of what you guys do. It's really awesome. But if I ask the question of the night, I'm totally getting a hat. So
we'll see. I'm not
eligible. But yeah, you and I talked a little bit pre-show about this, and I wanted the audience to hear. I think Eric's on right now.
Yeah.
He chimed in. But there's a story behind this a little bit, right? This wooden snakehead piece.
Yes, and what's really cool is there's a story that I can tell you, but there's a longer story before I found that piece of wood that none of us will ever know, and that's kind of the cool part about driftwood. I mentioned I duck hunt, not as much as I used to. I also used to be a decoy carver. Could still do it if I had the time. And I recently kind of got into fish art, and Eric and I have talked about doing a collaboration. Maybe I carve something, he paints it, whatever, something like that. We'll eventually get to it. But through these conversations and getting to know Eric as a great supporter of CCA and great member of ours, we were talking one day about some fish art, and I said, man, I've got this plank of wood in my garage. I've been carrying it around. I think this is the third house that I've had it at, and it was about maybe 8 feet long, and as you can see, the holes were in it, kind of alternating patterns. And I found that piece of wood on an island in the southeast portion of the Chesapeake, Northeast Island, which is part of the Bloodsworth complex. We were out hunting on a site there. Got up to take a little walk, and there's that piece of wood, and it's kind of like a red core. I don't know if it's a juniper or like a western red cedar or something like that. I had to sneeze. Ooh. Whew. Maybe I'll fight it.
Well, that's brutal when you can't get it out.
Ugh. Anyway, so I found that piece of wood, and you can see by the pattern of the holes that it's got to be a plank of some sort of boat. And it was well worn and rounded over, but still in good shape. I mean, you can still carve it and shape it like Eric did. So I said to Eric, I'm going to have to bring you this piece of wood. It probably took me a year before thinking about it, before I brought it down to him, probably at one of our chapter meetings or something. And he's turned it into that snakehead. And I think he also did a pickerel with it. And I was just glad to have somebody finally make something out of it, because I've got a whole pile of driftwood in my garage, and I like picking that stuff up, fishing slow, walk an island, or, walk along the shoreline of those islands and find some cool stuff. And I pick up bushel basket bottoms, and they're typically split in half. So they're a half circle. They make a perfect little thing to do some artwork on for like above a doorway or, sitting on a shelf somewhere. So I've done some of those for various CCA events in the past, and I'm a driftwood guy. So there it is on your wall.
I love it. I love it when I see a good piece as well. Actually, I used to own a solo skiff, and I flipped it one time in my entire time of using it. And it was because I was coming into my creek on Herring Bay, which we're going to talk about here in a bit. And I saw a piece of driftwood over to the starboard side. I was like, oh, that's awesome. And I just couldn't control myself. And I just cut the 6 horsepower Mercury like 90 degrees. And apparently solo skids aren't supposed to be turned 90 degrees. Because I went, flying right out of it. And luckily I had my
kill switch.
Kill switch. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me actually when we were waiting for the show to intro, and I forgot I had sent you that picture of me running down it's an Eastern Shore River somewhere. I was snakehead fishing in my Ginu, which is a low sider, a 1966 low sider. That's too much horsepower. That's a 15 on the back. It's rated for a 10. And in front of me, kind of in the section between the front seat and the middle seat, is my Yeti sitting there. And one of our board members, Toby Fry, who is 78 years old, is sitting up in the air on this cooler. And I'm 260. I'm in the back, and I'm like, this cannot be safe. And talking about testing what these little boats can do. These Ginus are amazing.
Right.
Just cruising around, these corners and stuff, catching snakeheads, having a good time. And it wasn't until I saw that picture that I went, I never should have had Toby up in front of me like that. And I probably wasn't wearing my kill switch, so my apologies. But it was before the law says that we have to.
Yeah, I've got but that same 6 horsepower is sitting right on my porch, and it's got a little plastic shoved behind the kill switch. So I've never had to wear one. I think last week's episode, I told a story about not wearing a life jacket. And this week's episode, I'm talking about a rigged kill switch. So
you must be a cat, 9 lives or something.
Well, I'm not endorsing safety.
No, neither am I.
Not okay. But you said you had some other Eric Packard pieces behind you.
Well, yeah. So this is one from looks like December of 18. A little kind of pen and ink with a little bit of color, kind of the top fins of a rockfish. And Eric provides art for CCA quite a bit for events. We had a Kent Narrows tournament 2 years ago, I think. Eric did a pen and ink that we digitized. This ended up being an American flag.
That's super cool.
Yeah, with the fishing rod. So that was a T-shirt for the Kent Narrows Fly and Light Tackle Tournament. And then we have this is an original canvas here of reef balls turning into different fish. And the detail is just cool as can be. Cow nose and bluefish. I mean, you can see them all in there. And he did a great job. And sturgeon. And this artwork actually inspired a T-shirts and shirts that are being sold right now to support our reef ball program, our habitat program through Deep Apparel and the No Shoes Reef brand, which is Kenny Chesney's brand, No Shoes Reefs, like No Shoes Nation. So that was actually sitting in the back of a Zoom call I had this past year, and we were talking about different kinds of artwork, and it inspired the guy from No Shoes Reefs was like, "What's that?" And next thing you know, a couple months later, he came up with this design for us that inspired. So, Eric, I still have some shirts coming your way as a thank you for that, because it kind of tells the story. The whole idea is that our motto of the Living Reef Action Campaign, our habitat program, is habitat today, fish tomorrow. And for many, many years, there's this concept that if you build an artificial reef, you're just attracting fish to this reef so they're easy to catch. Yes, when you have healthy habitat, you're going to have fish around it, and they're going to be catchable. And when you have fish in a high density and abundance, which healthy habitat can produce, you're going to be successful. But what we're doing is producing the whole ecosystem when we install one of these reefs. And it's kind of exciting to me. I'm a visual guy, like to dabble in art a little bit. So when Eric put that together for us, I just thought, this is great. And now you'll see it all over the place, that kind of concept. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, Eric, we appreciate all the artwork that you do. Keep it rolling, brother, because it's great stuff. And I really think it captures the Bay really well and kind of gives a voice for all of us in a different medium. So really great stuff. And I'm proud to have it on the walls behind my set. And I know I've been hesitant to put this one up because it's a gift from you to me. But I think I'm going to because I really like it. And if anyone asks if it's for sale, I'll just say absolutely not, or I'll just tell them sure it is. Just it's $10 billion, and I'll give you at least $100 of that profit.
I got a text message the other day from a guy that said, "Hey, sir, I'd like to buy your house at so and so address, the house I live in." And so I replied with an astronomical number, and he got back to me. He's like, well, if you'd like to talk about a realistic number, I could have a conversation. I was like, oh, I thought you were a robot.
Wait, this is real?
You can try that technique. If somebody says, I want to buy it, tell them 10 grand, split the proceeds of there.
Everything's for sale, right?
Amen.
Maybe I should have thought about that a little bit, but I think everything just about. But you just talked about something that is very important to me. You brought up the reef balls that you guys are working on with the CCA. And I've been a huge proponent of oyster habitation for a very long time. I think I was, watching a YouTube video, reading an article, and they showed those. I'm sure everyone's seen it. Those two aquariums sitting side by side, and the one's got oysters in it and the one doesn't.
Yep.
And the one with the oysters in it has the water crystal clear. And that got me thinking about it. I'm actually growing oysters. I live right on Broadwater Creek, right in Herring Bay, and I'm growing 500 oysters out there.
Great.
But yeah, so that's incredibly amazing on the water cleaning end of it, right? But just selfishly, I'm like, my fishing just got a lot better right out in front. But tell us about that. Tell us about the oyster project that you're working on in Herring Bay.
Yeah, so the Living Reef Action Campaign is the big program, and we can kind of go back and tell that story in a little bit here. But kind of fast forward to 2 weeks ago, 2 Thursdays ago, we actually put 78 mini bay reef balls. Mini bay is the size of a reef ball. And actually I have somewhere around me a model reef ball because I was using it today on a call, but I can't find it right now. Oh, here it is. So for those that may not know, that's what a reef ball looks like. This happens to be a model where folks can donate and say they get their name and the latitude, longitude. So it's part of one of our programs. But a reef ball is this 3-dimensional structure. The holes are for animals to be able to come through. Also, the current to be able to squeak through the holes and break up, and that creates oxygenation and turnover of the water column. I found this out recently. If you don't have a hole in the top of a structure like this, the water current can actually have a tendency to lift it and move it. So it's specifically engineered and designed to sit on the bay bottom, sit on the bottom throughout the world. They're used in 70 different countries. And so more recently, I say 2014, CCA started really doing some reef ball work. And in 2015, we officially launched the Living Reef Action Campaign. And then in 16, 17, and 18, we deployed 388 of the mini bay reef balls at the Tillman Island Reef site across the bay from you. And when recognizing that, so in 2018, we had the really fresh water come through and impact the bay. That even came into 2019 as well. So it impacted,
I remember.
It impacted oysters and impacted everything. It impacted spat production or production of juvenile oysters, right? So we took a step back, and then 2020 hits, and we've been kind of rebuilding. And long story short, last week or 2 weeks ago, we put these reef balls in place. And 78 of them, they're all set with oyster spat. So the Chesapeake Bay Foundation is truly who did the heavy lifting on this, no pun intended. Their facility in Shadyside, their team puts the reef balls in 3,500 gallon tanks. They stack them up. There's 36 per tank. And then they pump in creek water. They purchase oyster larvae, which gets overnighted by FedEx and gets dunked into the tanks. The oyster larvae are at a point in their life cycle where they're swimming. And there you go. There's some reef balls. And this is not the Chesapeake Beach project, but we'll talk about that one next. And so the Chesapeake Beach one, all the reef balls get encapsulated by the oysters as they set, which is part of their kind of life cycle. For the first 3 weeks of their life, they're free swimming. And it varies, but they come down and try and identify or try and find a reef to attach to. The perfect substrate for an oyster to attach to is oyster shell, but we have a lack of oyster shell in the bay, not only from the population declining, siltation, tearing down the bars through harvest, disease, lots of things have impacted our oyster population. So reef balls are kind of jump starting it. And you can think about the 3-dimensionality, the mini bay reef ball we deployed is 300 pounds, a lot of surface area. I want to say with a good spat set, high density, it may start somewhere between 900 and 1,500 oysters per reef ball that attach, survive, and will grow up into adulthood. And that's good. That's some pretty good density for that size hunk of concrete. They're about 2.5 feet in diameter, 2.5 feet tall or so, in that size. And if folks have seen the footage, there's some great video of what Chesapeake Bay Foundation did. And there you go. Jay Berry from the town of Chesapeake Beach was also involved in that deployment and ran the boat. I see his comment just popped up. He was our captain that day. We had John Bacon from the Chesapeake Beach Oyster Cultivation Society with us as well. And everything was done under the banner of the Chesapeake Oyster Alliance. And that's important to mention, because the Chesapeake Oyster Alliance is something spearheaded initially by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. They are the administrative partner that takes care of all that alliance. And what they're doing is helping lift up other groups throughout the bay. So CCA and our Habitat Trust has been a Chesapeake Oyster Alliance partner from day one. And we couldn't do it without partners like CBF and CBOX and folks like Jay, the town of Chesapeake Beach, and all of our members that help build these reef balls. And so we, as I mentioned, that history of kind of the many years and then kind of a lull because of low spat production. And then 2020, we've really been focusing on getting as much reef in the water as possible this year. And so we did place 100 low-profile reef balls, which are a little bit smaller. They're the ones we typically build in our program with elementary and middle school students, because that's really the core of Living Reef Action Campaign, is going into schools and building right into the school day, adding to the students' curriculum through their STEM programs and building reef balls. So we put 100 in the Magathy in January. These 78 just splashed in July. And then that picture you just posted, if you can bring that back up, these reef balls are actually loaded up in Rumbly, which is a peninsula. It goes out into the Anamessex River. And you've got kind of Crisfield and Janes Island to the south, Deal Island to the north. It's a really beautiful area full of seagrass and full of oyster beds, and Tangier Sound is just a beautiful and healthy place. So we're placing those reef balls that were in that picture, as well as an entire truckload of Reef Pyramids, which were donated by the Ocean City Reef Foundation. So there's a lot of stuff, and the best place to point folks right now is our website, ccamd.org/habitat. That page kind of tells the story of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then there's a map towards the bottom, and we're actively working on updating that map. Not all the information's on there, but it basically lays out the places that CCA and our partners have placed reef balls, and we will be in the future. And so the Janes Island Reef, the Chesapeake Beach Reef are the two that are happening right now. We also have some great partners in Talbot County that have the Midshore Fishing Club builds reef balls as well. So they have about 50 of them that we're going to help move into place here in the next couple of weeks. And then reef balls that were built actually at Harford Day School and a couple other Harford County partners. We stored them in Essex, hoping for an upper bay deployment this year. But we made the decision to get those reef balls in the water, and it's going to happen down in Talbot County somewhere. So either we're talking about Hollicott's Noose in Eastern Bay, Tillman Reef, or Cook's Point, which is the Clint Waters Memorial Reef. It'll be one of those because the guys that came about to bring this together are Talbot County guys. So that'll be that'll be 4 reefs in 2009. 2009. I don't know what I'm talking about. 2021. It's 4 reefs in 2021, which will be a big step in the right direction. And we even have more reef balls coming. And one last thing, we were really blessed with an opportunity to support DNR's Lake Improvement Fund. And so where CCA's work is largely done in tidal waters, we're a coastal organization. You get into a place like Maryland, America in miniature, and a lot of anglers in Maryland love to fish anything we have. And it can be brook trout, striped bass, white marlin, 3 key fisheries we have in the state to celebrate. So folks from their inland fisheries department posted an opportunity to bid on a project. We were fortunate enough to win the bid, and 50 of the mini bay reef balls were deployed in Lake Habib out at Rocky Gap State Park.
Okay.
And then 50 more at Cunningham Falls, and then 50 more at Blair's Valley. So their inland folks are even utilizing this great structure, and the 3-dimensionality of it just provides for so much different aquatic life. So I know they did post some things on Facebook when those reef balls were deployed at those 3 freshwater lakes. And I actually got a text message from a great friend who used to work at DNR, a picture of the reef ball as he was catching some panfish off of it a couple weeks ago. So
Nice.
it's out there to be found. And it's all about partnerships. You're talking about Hartford Day School, and the way we try and run the program with the schools has always been first come, first serve. We have a calendar link that we share with the teachers or anybody that would ask. We do these for team building exercises as well for corporate partners or other nonprofits. We have a couple of those in the works. We've attached them to sponsorships to events where we're trying to cover our costs and make it worth our while to go out and work with a school or work with a corporate partner. But schools are always free. They've been free from day one. The occasional school has come up with a small donation here and there, and we really appreciate that. But that's not what it's about, And actually, the really cool part about based on where you're located, that we've been waiting to launch, but just COVID and everything's gotten in the way of.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Chesapeake program with Calvert County Public Schools.
Mm-hmm.
Together a really forward-thinking grant that they were awarded. The work was supposed to start in the spring of 2020. We were supposed to go to every single elementary school in Calvert County and have the Living Reef Action campaign brought to the students. And that is still going to happen. It's just a matter
That's
of
awesome.
when.
That's
Right now, we're
stuff.
looking at spring. And the grand vision there, the grand vision there is that every single reef ball we build in Calvert County goes by or gets planted in Calvert County waters. Accessible to the kids that participated in the reef ball build.
Hey, you're benefiting me again. That's I fish that area all the time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So
it's not selfish stuff. Like this is like having worked in education for as long as I have. I can't think of a more hands-on, experiential learning, tangible lesson to provide to these elementary school youth. I mean, that's too cool.
Can you pull up that other picture you had up a minute ago?
Yeah, sure can.
This is the coolest story, and I think it explains what Living Reef Action campaign is all about. And I tell people all the time, I see Steve Cambo Trout there making a comment. I'm the most fortunate guy in the world, at least in Maryland, to be able to do the work I do, which is hard work. It's frustrating. It's tough. It's dirty. It's dusty at times. It's political. But I'm really happy to do it because of guys like Cambo Trout that are out there promoting fishing and everybody that can enjoy these things. And when you can connect all the way to youth, which, they'll be the ones carrying the torch for us into the future. We're benefiting or are impacted by what people in front of us have done. So, what are we going to leave to our kids? And to be able to be involved in something like this. So what you're looking at there is a barge in Rumbly, beautiful part of the world. We don't need too many people going down there and messing it up. So small groups.
I don't even know what you're talking about. So,
but these are low profile reef balls for the most part. I see a mini bay up there front and center, but and a couple are broken actually. I was in a rush. So since June, we've been trying to get these reef balls put in place. We worked with a local marine contractor. They've been just great, taking time away from their other work to help out with this. And so we've been loading these reef balls up. But this all started because about last August or so, a gentleman from Salisbury, Brian Sheets, from Straight Edge Construction, he called me, and he had been fishing with Monty Hawkins on the Morning Star, who is kind of like my number one mentor in this reef work, and a guy I try and aspire to be like because he's a champion of reefs in the ocean. So Brian called and said, "Hey, Monty told me to call you." He said, "You're the only one. CCA is the only group really spearheading real reef work in the Chesapeake. I want to be able to do what Monty does on his boat and go out day after day and put out reef when I go fishing. Like, why can't we do that? It's complicated, but we can't." So I said, "Hey, Brian, look, with COVID and everything, we're not going to be in the schools this fall. We've got a reef ball trailer that was supposed to be down in Southern Maryland. It's not being used. Rather than have it sit here, why don't we plan some dates? I'll come down. We'll do a deal. I just need a place with water, electric, and where the reef balls can safely sit out overnight or maybe 48 hours. It depends on the temperature and some of the complexity of working with concrete. But ultimately, he's like, dude, let's do it in my side yard." So he and his wife and their great family hosted a reef ball build in their side yard. I show up in his trailer. We've never even met, right? I pull up into his driveway, and he's like, "Hey, man, how you doing?" And I back the trailer up. We've got The folks from Outdoors Delmarva did a little YouTube video on that. And the trailer, actually, bring it back, Eric Packard did the original artwork that the trailer is wrapped in, because it's going to be used in Southern Maryland. I'm like, hey, Eric, it's going to be in your neighborhood, man. You want your artwork on this trailer? And he did this awesome mural. The original we actually sold in a auction in 2019. So anyway, I bring the trailer down to Brian's place. He's in a construction company. His crew is there, all of them ready to go. We've got donuts and coffee, and we start rocking and rolling and building reef balls. And they build 20 of them, which is our capacity in our one trailer. Build 20 of them. I'm like, all right, man, I didn't have to come back the second day. Reef ball building is day one. You assemble the molds, you mix the concrete, you put it in. It has to harden, and then the next day you remove all the molds, put them away, clean them up, and you've got your reef ball. They build in their full strength. It takes a little while for them to cure. We use a mix to make sure that they're marine grade and they're pH neutral, so they don't have an impact on the environment anyway, and the animals can attach to them right away. I'm reading Eric's comment. Yeah, I do live and breathe this stuff. So anyway, we go down there, and then next thing you know, Brian calls me. He goes, "Hey, Danny Wynn from Acme Tile. Hey, do you know Danny?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, I know Danny. I met him at the Red Trout Tournament years ago. Danny's a great guy." He goes, "Danny wants to help out. He's going to host a reef ball build at his house with his church group. Is that cool?" I said, "Yep. Save your receipts. We'll reimburse you for the expenses. If I can get there, I will." These guys did this 3 or 4 times, 5, 6 times, whatever it was.
This is like grassroots oyster.
We're building, literally, that's what CCA is all about. And, that's what we do. Not this example exactly, but grassroots around the country. So, one phone call that Brian made, and me saying yes, which I do way too much, but it turned into that pile of reef balls you see there. And so what you couldn't see in the back of the picture, and you'll see more of very soon, because those are going to splash on Friday. They're in the way back there. Actually, they're kind of the foreground off to the right of the pile there, about halfway back, are Reef Pyramids. So not only did we build these reef balls, Brian, Danny, and some other volunteers, and I brought some down. In fact, I brought reef balls down from Harford County that were built by a Girl Scout, Sea Scouts, and an Eagle Scout all on the same day. We loaded them up and brought them down as well. Anyway, so those reef pyramids are something that Monty Hawkins designed himself, and he knows that, if you get oysters back in the bay filtering and functioning the way that we need them to, which is a tall order. But if you get that done, you've got cleaner and clearer water, and you can start to stop this you can denitrify the system. We've basically ruined it. 20-some million people living in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. The runoff and everything that all of us create by living here has made the waters green, excess algae. And that's why, in the old days, they used to catch marlin at the jack spot. Yeah. 26 miles out of Ocean City. Now it's the 100 fathom line, which is 56 miles straight shot or whatever it is. And Monty's been one of the visionaries that talks about that a lot, that concept. And he's right. The bottom line is the way the estuaries have drained into our oceans and impacted our bottom here locally. As you get down to the lower bay, there's sections of, in fact, not far from you, where the bottom's just dead, period. Mm-hmm. The deep spots, there's nothing alive, not even bacteria. Yeah. And that's unacceptable. And oysters are the only solution. It can benefit us all. So Monty, he talked to me on Friday. He said, "Hey, there's going to be a tractor trailer show up with 112 reef pyramids. I hope you're ready for it." So my Monday was waking up in Baltimore, driving to the Eastern Shore, renting equipment, offloading this tractor trailer, loading that barge, and then as the sun set at that boat ramp, I turned and took the Bobcat back and got home at 1 a.m. So, I did take a nap yesterday.
That's too cool. So I was reading, and I read the article, and if you guys haven't checked it out, there's a cool article on all of this in the Bay Weekly this week that talks about David and the CCA's work and a lot of other great organizations. And the goal is, and it's not on the top of my head, isn't it? It's something billion number of oysters by 2025. What's the number?
Yeah. So the Chesapeake Bay, the Chesapeake Oyster Alliance, which was really the brainchild, and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation's championed that. The goal is 10 billion new oysters in the bay by 2025. I want to say we started in 2019. And there's folks can Google it. Chesapeake Oyster Alliance. There's some great information on their site, great resources for anybody that's interested in oysters. And folks can be named partners of the alliance, like we are, and we have aquaculture as well. And so, and even the industry, the wild harvest industry, is more than welcome to participate. There's a whole complexity to that and a long history of oysters, but ultimately we're trying to count what the partners are doing to put oysters into the bay. And so those counts I mentioned on the mini bays, 900, 1,500 spat or so, that's it. I mean, we're adding those up to be the 10 billion. And where the typical way you're putting oysters in the bay is spat on shell. So recycled oyster shell is aged and set out in piles to dry out and make sure everything's dead and dry and ready to go. They're put into bags by hardworking volunteers, and just like the stuff you said you have growing, the spat are attached to them in tanks from hatcheries, and these are what's called a diploid, or a standard oyster that can spawn. So they are, if put into the water and they survive into spawning age, they'll continue to reproduce and support more oysters. So spat on shell is how the majority of restoration's been done, but also aquaculture. There is some aquaculture that does spat on shell. So the old oyster shell with about maybe 10 spat is a good density. It grows in clusters, which are not always ideal for the half shell market. But then you have cage aquaculture as well, where folks are putting oysters in the cages to protect them from predation. They culture them throughout their life cycle until they're ready for market. There's lots of different ways they do that. And then there's folks that actually use float aquaculture as well, which is a little bit, it's not as popular. It causes conflicts with nearby neighbors and stuff. And it's expensive the gear's expensive, but ultimately the Chesapeake Oyster Alliance is trying to embrace everything that the aquaculture industry is doing by providing oysters 365 days a year. Those oysters are providing habitat for fish, especially juvenile fish, while they're in the waters, and they're also filtering. And some really cool stuff that's just come about has been nutrient credit trading as well. Johnny Shockley is a guy who was a career waterman for years from Hooper Island, multi-generation. And he and many other partners and supporters started an aquaculture business many years ago. And now he's the first official nutrient credit trading broker with Blue Oyster Environmental in the Chesapeake, or in the Maryland portion of the Chesapeake. So they've actually done scientific studies to study an oyster, figure out how much nitrogen it sequesters by eating algae, which is fueled by the nitrogen. The oysters eat it. It grows their shell, it grows their meat in their body, and sustains their life. And then also they have feces, and bacteria will decompose that, which is the way the system's supposed to work. Mm-hmm. And they actually regas nitrogen into the air. And so you're actually breathing an oyster fart right now is the take home there, because most of what we breathe in air is nitrogen gas. So anyway, the whole point is that whole system is something we broke. I mean, we've terribly broken it by taking out the bivalves, the filters out of the water, and impacted it by what we do on land. And so 10 billion is a big number, but we're on track, even with some of the headaches of 2018, 2019 with spat production because of fresh water, natural mortality, as well as some of the work that's been done recently. And of course, we have COVID impacting everything as well. But there's good news for oysters, and even the population, and talking to some of the wild folks, the wild fishery folks, and hearing through the deliberations of the Oyster Advisory Commission, the population's up. Are we constraining harvest enough? I would say no, but that's a 150 plus year debate.
Sure. So I know, you may not be, a world-renowned aquaculturist, but if we reach this 10 billion new oyster mark, what would be some of the things that you think that we would see as outdoorsmen and sportsmen?
Well, so there's been some interesting studies that people much smarter than me have done on that front, and one that comes to mind is something that Morgan State led, and it's related to the economic potential of the crab fisheries, envisioning a different future because of a certain action today. And so it was related to the Harris Creek Oyster Sanctuary in Talbot County, which was completely fraught with conflict and debate to this day, whether these sanctuaries make sense. But the idea is that you need a growing biomass of oysters can filter the water at a higher volume. And they say 30 to 80 gallons per day. It's so complicated to really truly explain that. Those numbers probably don't do it justice. They probably are a little bit inflated. And that's because, just like us, you have good days, you have bad days, you have good conditions, bad conditions. They're hungry, they're not. 365 days is a long time, and there's probably, and if you consider the size of the Chesapeake Bay, there's a lot of variability. Bottom line is they're the best filter we have. On top of the oyster reef, there are some studies that show that, on top of the oyster, there are some studies that show that all the other organisms that live on the reef can add another 50% of filtration capability.
Oh, wow. That's something I hadn't heard. Yeah.
Yeah. There's little squirts, tunicates you'll hook sometimes jigging on a reef, and anemones. All these things are filtering. And mussels as well. Mussels are a huge filter feeder, of course, even in our freshwater rivers. I mean, we're lacking mussel and clam populations, and they're extremely important too. So ultimately, what we would see is clearer water. The clarity would be clearer. And clarity is so important because right next to an oyster reef in relatively shallow water, we need subaquatic vegetation or submerged aquatic vegetation, SAV. SAV and oysters together, you take what's called the interstitial space, so all the nooks and crannies in an oyster reef. Those are all places for.
That's a big word for a fishing show, David.
Interstitial, and all this information's out here to read. Some of these studies are great. That could help you with the napping concept. Is reading some of these studies, but ultimately that space and all those nooks and crannies is surface area and opportunity for something to live, or something that filters to live, something to hide from a predator. And then grasses do the same thing. Grasses are that place for juvenile species to grow. All of those little critters that we don't even think about unless we're using them for bait, they've got to start somewhere. They've got to grow up. And so the grasses are key. Grasses and oysters together help with shoreline stability, help with kind of resilience and stuff that, people are talking about with sea level rise, climate change. And, regardless of the debate, the reality is the erosion that is occurring in the Chesapeake Bay is obvious. And I'm 39 years old, and some of those islands I was talking about earlier, I mean, I can see the way they've changed in my lifetime, recreating down there for 20 years. So ultimately, all these things are a big impact. So what we would see as anglers is cleaner, clearer water, a healthier ecosystem, because you have the very basis of it: bait fish, crabs, shrimp, all these things that live there, and then all the fish that we care about on top of that. And I'll tell you, we better get used to fluorocarbon if we get our job done, because our bay waters will be clear. And we got a little taste of it in what was that, like 18, 17? It wasn't 18.
17 was the last really good fishing year that I can remember.
It was a year that it was so crystal clear. I was fishing down in Bloodsworth on a little wreck. That's a former, it's a bombing range down there, former bombing range. They probably just mess with it electronically now. And I actually called in the experts down at PAX Naval Air Station because I found a bomb. Wow. That Jay Fleming later photographed actually underwater. And I think it's actually in his new book that's coming out soon. But ultimately it's in 6 feet of water. And I was standing on the bow of my boat by the trolling motor looking down, and I saw a perfect X. And this bomb only sticks out of the bottom about 2 feet. So I could see 4 feet down and identify that there's a bomb stuck in the ground right here. Don't tap that with the trolling motor. So we had a really clear year, and that's the bottom line. I mean, clarity is where it's at. Living in such the Chesapeake is in this day and age, when you can click on a map and zoom out and kind of see the whole thing, I think we take for granted how big and how diverse it is sometimes. Yeah. And that's a challenge we have to think about. Plus, not to jump into the conservation part of the conversation, but we have to consider that our impact is probably a little more outsized than it used to be because of technology today. Correct. So everything in this whole space is kind of framing your mind around what is success, what is a step in the right direction. Mm-hmm. That 10 billion goal, I can't remember all the exact conversations about what 10 billion oysters provides, but I know there's a lot of great information on the Chesapeake Oyster Alliance website. And every partner involved in that, and even ones that aren't, are going to be a part of either moving us in the right direction or the wrong. And we've chosen the right one.
It's great stuff and stuff I'm very passionate about. We have a question coming in from David Hall.
Okay.
He says, I take the kids to fish the reefs. What's the best way to fish the reefs? I tried drifting and anchoring. I lost a bunch of high-low rigs when I fished those areas. Thanks for all you have done.
Absolutely. Great question, Dave. So, I think, and in fact, at Janes Island, the reef that's going in later this week, we talked about it the other day. There's all sorts of jokes about, can we just put this somewhere and not tell anybody where it is? I wish. But what we're going to try and do in that one in particular is design it as a patchwork reef. There's a lot of studies that show that providing that kind of patchwork, you can really kind of maximize the value that you provide to the local area, because you're providing these kind of lumps and humps. And, that might be a dozen or so reef balls per pile in those reef pyramids as well. We're designing that, and I've been talking with folks in the lower shore area. Is that a good idea? And it's kind of inspired by the way that I've seen folks fish down there, where a lot of times you'll see guys fish in a boat at a bank, kind of casting at the bank. And while a lot of folks kind of in the lower eastern shore, local guys will come in, nose the boat into the marsh bank and fish off. Haven't talked about the details of it, but I thought about it, and I went, if I'm fishing a reef and there's going to be a bunch of boats that come out and participate, or fish on a busy day, why don't we provide a bunch of different spots for them to anchor up on? So the idea is that anchor up, tide, slip back to the reef, and that way you're not just straight up and down kind of dropping your stuff down into one of these reef balls. I mean, here's why: if it's a reef ball reef, this is why you're missing, your top and bottom rig. If you're dragging across it, et cetera, you can kind of drop down inside of it and lose it really quick. So I would recommend up tide, kind of almost fanning out some baits and some rigs to see where you're getting bites. And then you're going to get right next to that reef and that kind of find your sweet spot. It always is the danger zone, I think, where some of these fish are most active. That's part of fishing, unfortunately, that we do lose a few rigs here and there. But I would recommend that, kind of anchoring up and drifting back to it. The Tillman Reef, which is 388 mini bay reef balls, that one we set out in perpendicular, or lines perpendicular to the current. The idea was that we could help create this jetty, underwater jetty almost, where the current would tip over. That's good for re-oxygenating the bottom and turning over the water column. So that reef's a little bit different, and it's not perfect. It's not a jetty like the inlet at Ocean City or anywhere else you'd see. We did our best to drop them in clusters of 4 or 5, reef balls at a time to make a line. And there are 3 parallel lines down there of those 388. So I'd recommend, you're not going to get a good, it's almost like fishing the sewer pipe by the Bay Bridge. It's a rock pile, current going across it. You're only going to get it for a short little window. So if you're bait fishing, you're better off kind of anchoring back to it. I haven't seen the final side scan or shape files for the Chesapeake Beach Reef, but we are absolutely going to put them out publicly. And so you guys, now more than ever, David, you get a visual opportunity to see that reef you're fishing. And until side scan came about, you could drift over a reef and just go, oh, there's a little hump right there. I mean, we dropped 400 tons of pipe in Tangier Sound in February of 2017. And I think it was like 18 or 19. I was down there fishing with my good buddy, Captain C.L. Marshall, Tangier Sound Charters. Great captain. And I'm like, dude, let's find this reef. We're using just regular old fish finder. And it was like, oh, there it went. It's gone. But that's a lot of pipe. So, if you don't have this high technology, just stick with it. I would say even throwing on like a metal jig, like a Sting Silver or something like that, is a great way to kind of search around it and figure out where the tough spots may be before you start bottom fishing. So that's my tip.
My co-host Anastasia, the lovely Anastasia, was unable to be with us tonight, but it's hilarious. She's like groaning in the background because you keep answering her question. I think she wants a hat. She wants one of those awesome hats. But
what color hat she wants?
She doesn't know quite yet that she's ineligible because she's a host of the show. But
I know people in charge.
What'd you say?
I know people who are in charge.
Right. But she was just asking. She was like typing. I hear it in the background about the beach erosion.
Yep.
And you said it literally 3 seconds afterwards. So
I think it's the second time actually I've answered whatever question.
Second time that's happened, exactly. My man Kevin Hogan asked, what, if any, county and state initiatives are there to stop nitrogen-rich fertilizers from being used to use the runoff effects? Yeah. So let's try this again. What, if any, county or state initiatives to stop allowing nitrogen-rich fertilizers are being used to stop runoff effects, I think?
Yeah. So I'm not 100% sure what's happening here in Maryland. And where we can, CCA lends our support to all these efforts without a doubt. What happens on land directly impacts the water. I personally would never fertilize my lawn. I don't care if you paid for it. It's ridiculous. You got to mow it more. It's not good for native animals. I mean, I love nothing more than seeing bees fly around in the clover patch I've got in my front yard. And I think it's a lot of it's education for folks to realize that they have this opportunity to control their own footprint. And so that's kind of the grassroots approach to how do you impact the bay. And in your life cycle, in your lifetime, it should be a net positive. And that's really not terribly hard to achieve. So, that said, we do rely on our government and these agencies to oversee these things. And there is a blueprint. There is a Chesapeake Bay blueprint, and from a federal all the way down to a state and local level, there are total maximum daily loads that can be end up in the bay in these small micro watersheds that have been divided up in the state. And there's a lot of really hardworking groups that look at that. Shore Rivers is one. They're a reef ball partner of ours. They spend a lot of time on the Eastern Shore testing waters. And one of my best friends in the world is a farmer from the Eastern Shore. Chicken farmer, plants corn and soybeans, and everybody says, "Oh, it's ag. Oh, it's farms." Well, yeah, there's an impact, but guess what? I eat chicken for dinner, and everything I have has corn or soy in it. So, we're all in this together, and it really just takes people taking big steps. I mean, no law, no regulation is going to solve these problems necessarily. We're going to solve them as a community. The Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay is another group that's doing amazing work up in the watershed and throughout the watershed. They're really empowering businesses to do the right thing. One cool thing, I got a sweet tooth, and I love ice cream, and I just happen to have a Royal Farms in walking distance. So Turkey Hill Ice Cream, a company that's being a great steward of the bay. They are supporting Alliance for the Chesapeake. They don't do a thing for CCA or me other than make really good ice cream. And there's these little pieces of the puzzle that are coming together, I think, on a private side of things more so. And without government regulation, maybe there wouldn't be the incentive to get the right thing done. But slowly but surely, I think things are improving. I know I didn't quite finish the whole story of nutrient credit. But ultimately what that's going to do is, if you're somebody that impacts the environment, whether it be a municipality with like a stormwater treatment plant or sewage treatment plant, ag, something like that has a net impact on a nitrogen impact on the Chesapeake, you'll actually be able to invest in a nutrient credit trading program, which Blue Oyster Environmental is championing, and make mitigation reefs. And so the first system was approved rating phosphorus and nitrogen at a certain price per pound removed, was actually certified a few years back. And then just recently a study done right here in Maryland, actually with CCA and CBF reef balls, was done to say, okay, can we quantify the nutrient removals or sequestration or sequestering of nitrogen in an oyster? Can we quantify that and then place a value on it, and then have some of the dollars invest in putting those reefs in the water, whether they be restoration or whether they be aquaculture? I've got my eye on a spot that it's just an idea right now, but we've got a spot where we're talking about a mitigation reef in the Chop Tank River that I hope CCA is a big part of. So that stuff's coming, and to me, that's what we can do in the water, and that's kind of where the lane that we're in. That said, what happens on land is extremely important. So rain barrels, not fertilizing your yard, being responsible, realizing that this isn't a political issue, this isn't a community issue. And, we need to take care of ourselves today and our future even more. And it just takes it little by little. So
well said. Well said. I mean, I say it all the time when I see people come out here and have a manicured lawn. It's like, if you live within a mile or so of the bay, if you live anywhere within the watershed, you don't need a manicured lawn. The weeds are green too,
Right.
Like you can that just doesn't come with the territory if you're going to live responsibly out here. And
it's funny too, because I'm a registered lobbyist, a grassroots lobbyist, and that's just because the day I started working for CCA full time, because I get paid by state's ethics rules, I have to register and report any sort of gifts I may give to elected officials, which I don't, typically speaking. And we, CCA is a 501c3, is not involved in that kind of stuff officially. So, but ultimately, I always laugh about it. And I say, look, folks, folks are saying, will ask me, oh, what kind of regulations are you pushing for? What kind of laws? And personally, I'd rather we didn't need these rules because we just got it right ourselves, because, our legislators are just hardworking folks, just like any of us, and they're trying their best to shape policy. And some of the policies that I work on are some of the most complicated. I mean, it's unfortunate, but the take-home message is if we can get it done on our own, we don't need to make a rule, just be responsible, hold each other accountable.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the best countries to live in the world have almost invisible governments, right?
Yeah.
So we're actually nearing the last few minutes of the show tonight, but we've barely touched on fishing. We've been kind of circling around it, but have you been fishing?
Talking about the foundation of it, right? The habitat.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been a great conversation. But have you been fishing much this year? Or you've been too busy dunking oyster balls?
I've been pretty darn busy. I will tell you that the first time I stepped foot on the Chesapeake Bay was the day of that reef deployment, at least the main bay. And I have, because, CCA is doing our invasives count. Before we did that event where we're trying to collect data on invasive species, I started getting obsessed with snakeheads, and it was a new little thing for me. And so I focused on them a little bit this year and really enjoyed it. I've done some bow fishing and some gigging as well, which I know is complicated, people's opinions on it. But I'll tell you, man, the best day of my year was fishing with some volunteers, actually gigging with some volunteers, where I brought home some snakehead. I cleaned them all the next morning. I logged all the data for science. I grilled them up for myself, and I gave them to friends and family. And that's what fishing's all about at its core.
Yeah.
People get confused by the word conservation. That's always catch and release. No, I love to cook. I love to eat a fish, a crab. I'm sorry, I'm allergic to crabs, but I like to eat fish, oysters, so on and so forth. So that's a big deal. I mean, I live in just inside the Baltimore City line. Just up the hill from my house is Lake Roland. So the day that stands out fishing wise for me was the cicadas. And hooking some carp finally after being able to sneak away for about a 2-hour window.
I've heard that. Were you doing it on I've heard that's a lot of fun. Was that on a fly rod?
Yeah. I'll fish any way you can fish, period, the end. I love fly fishing just because it's just a little more primitive in some ways. And I'll tell you, I'll never forget when I finally hooked that trout or that carp at the base of the Lake Roland Dam a few weeks ago, or a month ago now, or whatever. So, I'm one of those guys that'll go fishing for anything at any point. I just have to find the time. I have a young family and just a lot going on. And like Eric said earlier, I have a passion to do this work, and I'm fortunate enough to work in something I'm passionate about and, represent the members of CCA, which anybody can be, ccamd.org/join. You can become a member. You get a great magazine. Tide Magazine is our bi-monthly magazine. It comes out of our national office in Houston. And talking about grassroots, CCA started because of 14 guys that got together in tackle shop and said, we can't stand for redfish and speckled trout populations being decimated the way they are in the late 70s in the Texas Gulf Coast. They created CCA. They stood up, created a voice for those fish. And actually, the last piece that I'll get that's on our list, our Red Trout Tournament, which is all about catching redfish and speckled trout, is based out of Buzz's Marina. The event just went live today. I'm going to finish up with the posts, and folks that are on our email list will get an email tomorrow. ccamd.org/red trout is celebrating the diversity we have in the Chesapeake Bay as our striped bass population needs a break. We're catching redfish and speckled trout and giving folks prizes from Saturday through September 10th. If you sign up, you get to fish in the tournament, which is September 11 and 12. But from the day you sign up to September 10th, every fish you submit through iAngler Tournament is an entry for a random prize that we give away every Monday. So some of those hats, some other cool stuff will be given away to our participants, and you get a CCA membership when you sign up for the tournament.
And that's great stuff. And it's something that I say to anyone that will listen. If you look at the redfish population and what happened during the time period you're talking about, and then today, it's made a huge comeback because of that slot that's the exact same all the way from Florida, although as far north as they run.
Yep.
And I'm no botanist or aquaculturalist, but I would say that the same thing for striped bass would be extremely beneficial.
I agree.
A
And
slot that, once that striped bass hits 28 inches, which is where it really starts to become a mega breeder, it's alive. It's protected for life. But we have one last question from Butch before we move on. Butch Huber, a good friend of all of ours. Butch says, how badly does dam affect the water quality? I've seen massive die-offs of oysters north of the bridge. Is there any truth to the dam causing this?
So, the Conowingo, the Susquehanna River, obviously the Susquehanna is the majority of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. It is the core. The Chesapeake Bay should probably be called the Susquehanna Bay. So it is a major driver, but the Potomac and all the rivers have an impact. And I don't know any of the specifics of some studies or anything else that's been done, but ultimately, if the dam wasn't in place, all the sediment that's above it would probably already be in the bay, or would be already be in the bay. So our estuary as a whole is going through this evolution, and I always say that it's very hard for people in our short little window we get on this earth to really wrap our heads around what happened before us and what's going to happen after us. And I try and really understand that, or think about it a lot. The bottom line is what's happening at the Conowingo Dam now, where it's the reservoir is full of sediment and it scours and comes over the dam with rain events, absolutely impacts the upper bay. In many ways, it actually can help the grasses grow on the flats. The flats are the delta, but it absolutely covers things up, and it's a shame. One of the most important issues that CCA works on is related to Man o' War Shoal. It's the last great historic oyster bar in the upper bay. Baltimore County watermen just planted oysters on top of it. It used to be just this massive, beautiful place that produced so much. And there's not enough density or population of oysters to reproduce up there. And a big part of that's because it's been covered in silt. But you look at Man o' War Shoal, and you can read the permit application where DNR wants to dredge this shoal, and not dredge it like an oyster dredge it like keep the port open kind of dredge, like rip it apart. They want to cut into the side of it multiple times to get buried oyster shell out of it. And it's because there's layers. So there's multiple layers, just like anywhere in the earth, or of the different times in the Earth's history of shell and then mud and shell and mud and shell and mud. And so, this ecosystem and this estuary has been going through this evolution for a very long time. And right now, Conowingo is definitely a challenge. And it would be great if the leaders that are involved in multi-state government, the Chesapeake Bay Commission and so on and so forth, would find a real solution to giving us back some carrying capacity of that reservoir. Because frankly, I think if you have that dam acting and stopping sediment, we're in great shape. It's almost like a big sediment pond. And that's way oversimplifying it. But man, it would be great to get some of that out of there and find a place for it to go, because it does cover things up. 2018 was just sad with all that fresh water, all those animals dying. It was clams and mussels and oysters and crabs and everything just being impacted. And bottom line is, believe it or not, we all have a part of that as well too. So we hope that Pennsylvania, New York, the states above us do their best to follow some of the agreements that are in place, the Bay Agreement and some of the EPA rules. And when they don't, we have to hold them to account.
That's a big reason to support the CCA, though, because there's a CCA Pennsylvania, correct?
Well, there's not. So we are the fullest. Well, so Pennsylvania residents kind of by default become part of CCA, so CCA Maryland. But there is a CCA across the country, and there's tons of other groups. So full-time employees and leadership in our chapters basically stop at Maryland and go down to the Mexican border. The full state of Texas where we were founded, and the full West Coast has CCA. There's 210 local chapters. And those states I've mentioned have fully functional chapters. We do have membership in the Northeast, but not full-time staff. But there's tons of other groups that do great work. And this is why in the conservation space, coalitions and partnerships are key. And it's so important. I mean, gosh, if we all can't wrap our heads around this after the last couple of years, figure out how to get along, realize that tomorrow's not guaranteed and it's going to be tough. And then it takes community, and that's it. I mean, get over ourselves and do what's right, period. And,
and you see this all over the fishing and outdoors world right now. It's divisiveness over, the stupidest little things instead of getting together and doing the right thing. We see this, I'm not going to point any fingers, but we see this over species of fish, any sort of possible issue that could be politicized, it is. And instead of people just, taking that time that they, ran on Facebook, or taking that time that they, complain about it to their buddies and going and making a difference. So
I can't tell you how many times I get phone calls. I got one today from.
Uh-oh.
I'm back.
Yeah, you're back. You froze for a second. The last thing we got was, I can't tell you how many times. It'd be a great way to end the show. We just all sit in.
I'm back.
You're kind of back, but you're not really.
I'm back, I think.
I think you're back. Yeah, for now you are.
The key is it takes a village. It takes all of us to be involved and provide our perspective. And Facebook, social media is an unaccountable way to achieve change. I've been in multiple debates with people on there. I try and stay off it because it's not very productive. And I can't tell you how many times people call me and say, "What can I do?" And the first thing I say is, stop just saying something on social media and feeling like you've done something.
Right.
Show up at the meeting. Take a day off of work. Call your delegates. Call your representatives. I mean, unfortunately, on our issues, a lot of times our elected representatives are flying blind. And I'll be the first to tell you that through all the advisory stuff you talked about when this show started, I'm on all these advisory bodies. Have the ability to advise. All of us have the ability to advise those that represent us. And yes, there's plenty of reasons that they and others give us every single day to stay at home, to feel upset, and just to realize to feel small, right? They win if you stay home. They win if you stay on social media fighting. And I love debate. I wouldn't be in this business if I didn't. I wouldn't be in policy work if I didn't enjoy trying to shape find the right solution. But there ain't a soul in the world that's sitting on social media is going to change the world. Arguing with people that are on your team. If I see one more, oh, it's just the commercial guys, or oh, it's just this, or oh, it's just that. If it was that simple, the problem would be solved.
It's a multifaceted issue. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, CCA was the group that banned shallow water gill nets in Florida all the way to Texas. Have we done it here? No, it's not the only thing we do. It's because we get organized. We bring a voice to the anglers that care. And personally, I love seafood. I just expect our government to manage it properly. So without people getting... Am I back?
Yeah, we lost you a little bit. Without people getting
involved, it's going to continue to be this binary argument of commercial versus rec, or one kind versus another kind. And that's just ridiculous. Not a single... Sorry.
Yeah, we got one final question for the Eric Packard show for tonight, and that is, when is the Cutlass Fish Tournament? Eric Packard show, ladies and gentlemen.
So, Eric, I'm going to challenge you to make some Cutlass fish artwork and...
Oh, man. Apparently, David has that 501c3 internet tonight.
No. I'm back.
Yeah. We got you.
I'm challenging Eric to make Cutlass fish artwork for a red trout Calcutta.
Oh, it'd be beautiful. The shiny sides that they have, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. David, thank you so much, man. I'm really inspired right now. I and a little bit ashamed. I've followed what you guys have done for the longest time and never become a CCA member. So that will be point number one as soon as this show ends tonight. And in terms of just social activism, I'm right where you are, and you've really kind of re-inspired that in me to step up and kind of make a difference here in my own community instead of using social media or getting up on my soapbox. But we have a question of the night. Once David Sikorski becomes unfrozen, we have these wonderful hats and a drum roll.
All right. I'm picking David. David Hall.
David Hall, my man.
Yep. Because he asked a fishing question, and
hey, you know what, David? I think you won one last year, but I'm not 100% sure. And you, David, you tune in to every single one of my episodes, so I couldn't be more happy that you won one of the hats. David Sikorski, if you could give us one more look at the hats, and that way David Hall can pick which one he wants.
This one's available in black as well. It's a mesh AFCO hat, right? We have a kind of a digital camo. These are Sims. This one's straight gray mesh back.
That's sharp. Straight gray mesh back one's sharp.
Yeah, it's a digital camo, and I think this one will fade. I also have there's the blue. I also have what's called a dad hat, so like all cloth. He said camo. So which one? They're a little bit different. I also have one that's all cloth if you prefer all cloth. So
you got a digital one, which is sort of the more pixelated one with the white logo on it. And
see, this is how you can tell I'm a turkey hunter and duck hunter. I went with a logo that blends in because this is a proper hunting hat. So nothing wrong with this one, but
so this is David Hall's first time winning, which makes me really happy because he's asked a lot of like really, really close second place questions.
All right, he's getting all cloth. Let me grab it real quick.
He's saying all cloth.
All right, let me make sure he likes it. Hey, why don't we give Butch one too? My nickname in high school from all my buddies is Butch, so I'm gonna give Butch a hat too.
Butch doesn't deserve it. Cool. Butch, David Hall, both of you guys text me your address, and I'll work with Sikorski here to make sure you guys get one of the prizes. So, but again, man, thank you so much for sharing your passion and really for everything that you do. I mean, we benefit every day from what the CCA does. Not only the environmental stuff that you guys do for our ecosystem, but the tournaments are just awesome. So, I mean, there's a CCA tournament pretty much all year round, isn't there?
Well, the invasives count is April 1st, October 31st, and we've got a lot more up our sleeve coming soon. So hang tight, and hey, you're welcome. I'm glad to do what I do. I couldn't do it without our membership. It's $35 a year. Sign up. Come on. You should be a partner, or a partner in all of this. And just by buying your fishing license, you're supporting conservation and giving us guys like me and others an opportunity to make sure DNR does their job. There's great folks there. There's great folks everywhere. It takes community. There's great folks in the commercial industry. Love your neighbor and work hard towards a better future is all we can hope for. So
I hear that, brother. Thank you so much, guys. Tune in next week, Baltimore Angler, and we're really looking forward to it. David Sikorski, thanks so much, brother.
Absolutely. You have a good night.
You too.
Thanks.
Just like